What's going on, guys? I am very excited to announce that Philly Sports Trips is now the official travel partner of the You Know Ball podcast. The biggest reason why I've partnered with Philly Sports Trips is really simple. I give them my money. I have a mini vacation that involves the Sixers, Eagles, and Phillies, and I don't have to lift a finger to plan anything. I can party as light as I want or as hard as I want, and Philly Sports Trips takes care of everything that I hate. The planning, the organizing, researching where to go, and I get a 5-star hotel, non-crazy flight schedules, and tailgates that have unbelievable food and booze, and most importantly, it's a douchebag-free zone. These are just some of the many reasons that I am excited to partner with Philly Sports Trips. I can't wait to go on a Sixers trip next season, and Uniball is absolutely going on the road to at least one Eagles game. So let me know which Eagles game you would want to go to, and I would love to do a huge Uniball road trip. Out of all the cities, I'm thinking New York or Chicago, but I want to know what you guys think as well. So tweet at me at TrillBroDude, DM me, comment on the YouTube, and let me know which Eagles game you guys think we should go as a group this season. Phillies and Eagles trips are booking right now. So head over to phillysportstrips.com and let them know that You Know Ball sent you for two very important reasons. Not only does it help fund the podcast, but we'll have VIP events and goodies specifically just for You Know Ball listeners. phillysportstrips.com, premium travel for every Philly sports fan, and a proud sponsor of the You Know Ball podcast. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and here we are again. Reed Wallach. Reed Wallach from BetSided is here, and we are expecting a Kevin Durant trade to happen in the next hour because every time we record, something big happens. Obviously, our last podcast was completely irrelevant for like 3 days because Kyrie opted in while we recorded. But now, Kevin Durant and Kyrie are obviously available for trade. And how are you feeling about the whole thing right now, Reed?
In the stages of grief, I'm now in the anger phase. I think I'm mad at just everybody. I think everybody deserves a piece of blame. Like if we do a pie chart, everyone would get like a little sliver here and there. I think the actual trade request is being kind of underreported. It just like came out, like we heard, there are like little inklings that you could piece together, but like it started with like Durant feels like the Nets don't understand Kyrie, and he's mulling his future. And then the Nets trade for Royce O'Neal, and like 30 seconds later, Durant goes straight to Joe Tsai with a trade request. And since then,
he's like, I hate Royce O'Neal with my life.
Like, that gets the Shams notification. Nope, out. Just text, I'm out. Like I'm a little confused at how we heard like Durant was a little pissed that the Warriors won or something. Obviously, there's like internal turmoil here and there, but like it just feels like the media has just kind of moved on from like, why does Kevin Durant want out of this very good basketball team? Like, I understand that they don't really get Kyrie. Like, it's just really that dynamic isn't really being reported. It's just like, okay, he's gone. Now what?
Right?
Like, I feel like there should be more coverage around why does this guy want to leave? And we're going to get into it. But every team he's going to go to is likely going to be worse than the Nets right now. I would argue the Nets have actually had a pretty decent offseason. They've kind of done what they had to do to get themselves a better team around Durant and Kyrie. So I just find the whole thing very bizarre, and I'm kind of pissed at everyone. I think that everyone has some blame here.
Yeah, so I'm with you on the fact that I think that whatever basketball situation he goes to is not going to be nearly as good, because we'll talk about the list of teams that could potentially be interested in him and what they would have to give up just to get maybe the greatest modern player ever, at least, that has been traded. So, like, you have a top 15 basketball player of all time who is close to his peak, close enough. I would say Durant's peak was probably 3 or 4 years ago, but at the same time, like, his post peak is just as good as 99% of guys' actual peaks. So, John Conchar, 3-year, $19 million deal. It happened,
I saw the
folks.
Twitter notification. I go, oh my God, is this really about to happen?
So, at least we got a little drop of slop, a little dollop. But just generally speaking, like, looking at the Nets roster right now, like, they let Bruce Brown walk, which I didn't really understand. Maybe they believe that Ben Simmons is going to be healthy and available next year. And like, why have Ben Simmons and Bruce Brown? Because Ben Simmons is going to take over that role. But at the same time, Bruce Brown kind of built himself into like a pretty good 3-point shooter. Like I felt like he was a good complementary piece. And also the amount of money that the Nuggets paid him, unless he knew for sure that the KD and Kyrie thing was just going to be so toxic that it wasn't ever going to be able to be recoverable. And he was like, well, I'll just go play with Jokic for the same amount of money. Then that would be understandable. But I look at the rest of the roster and I'm like, it's pretty good. Like, you know, obviously you have the question mark with Ben. You have, you know, Royce O'Neal's a nice addition. Patty coming back. You have a bunch of young guys that are kind of on the rise right now. The Joe Harris thing is a question mark because now he's being floated in rumors for that's probably coming from the Lakers side, almost definitely coming from the Lakers side. But at the same time, like you have really 5 of the greatest shooters of all time on this team.
Yeah.
You have Patty, Seth, Joe Harris, Kyrie, and KD in terms of shot creation and plus catch and shoot guys. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. And then you have Ben Simmons as well, and then some young guys on the rise with Claxton, Cam Thomas, and then Royce O'Neal's obviously a defensive guy. So I like the makeup of the Nets roster overall. I didn't love their offseason. I mean, I thought the TJ Warren thing is like, everything I've heard about TJ Warren is the same stuff that's been out there, which is like, he might just never be the same, but like, it's a fine buy low. Like
on the minimum, it's like,
sure, it's nothing.
If he flames out, it's like, what are you going
to
do? Yeah, you take a shot. Like, because something the Nets lack, and we don't need to do like a full offseason, like autopsy, but one, I think Royce O'Neal could be the Bruce Brown replacement. Like, basically turn Bruce Brown from a cutter into a shooter, which I see the logic there. And then for Warren, big issue for the Nets last year was they got no rim pressure outside of Kyrie. The lanes were all clogged. Like, if Warren, he gets inside, he could finish around like that mid-range area, he's just another guy that could beat a guy off the dribble. They sort of lack that. So for veteran minimum, who else are you getting out there?
Sure.
I don't think it's terrible. Goes both ways for him too, because he either takes the minimum and joins a contender, or he could like build back up his value as a bucket getter off the bench, and he could sign on for, you know, another team for a bigger deal going forward. So I thought
it's the Victor Oladipo thing.
In my opinion.
It's literally just Victor Oladipo with the Heat last offseason, where everyone says, you know, his injuries are so bad that he's probably never going to be the same. But look, he's turned himself into a decent role player. He helped Miami in the playoffs, and he's rebuilt up his value to the point where he at least got an $11 million contract with the Heat this year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the logic behind TJ Warren signing there. I get that. I just like from like an immediate on-court help perspective, I'm not really sure how much he will really help. But my whole thing is like, let's just get into what it would take, because that's why people came here. They want to hear the Durant trades.
They don't care what I think about TJ Warren's impact.
Yeah, well, look, the Nets offseason was fine, and I think that if KD and Kyrie came back, that they would be a very good competitive team in the Eastern Conference, assuming that Ben Simmons doesn't continue to just not play basketball. But with so many question marks, we can kind of all the reporting that's coming out from Woj and all the reporting that's coming out from everyone is like, it doesn't really seem like this is like a, you know, they could get back together and, you know, sing Kumbaya. And like, it seems like this is probably over at least. Like Woj even said, like, they're willing to hold him through training camp. They're willing to hold him into the season, but both sides expect to come to an agreement on a trade at some point, which tells you like it's probably going to happen either in the offseason or sometime during training camp, beginning of the season. So
I am operating as a Nets fan and as someone who obviously doesn't want to trade. I'm like, I am operating under the actual belief that they will be traded. You know what I mean? I'm not like holding out hope because like it just doesn't like I'm reading everything and I just like don't see it at all. So like
your dreams of the last dance is over.
Yeah, that quickly ended on because again, I do wish that these guys would actually sit down and talk about it, but it just seems like they have no interest in doing that. And, you know, I outlined before, like, I don't really get why he wants to go to a worse team. He's going to take another PR hit and all that. So, you know, I'm holding on a little bit in the back of my head of that Ramona Shelburne tweet, like immediately after the trade request, like we saw Kobe do this, like, you know, the Nets could say no. There's like a part of me that like hopes that could happen, but that's more like wishful thinking. I do believe something will get done. I more just hope the Nets don't like take some crappy deal just like, clap, wipe their hands clean and just get out of this mess. It's
I don't think
hold out for the best deal.
I don't think
this could really set you back for a while if you don't get what at least like something to build off of. Because like at least Durant has this extension. The Nets could get value back. They could get something that they could build around. Maybe not obviously be a title contender. They should never trade a guy who could be a one on a title team. They should never do that, but they don't have a choice. Maybe you could get back some young players, which we'll get into. Like, you could still set yourself up to be like, a pseudo contender in the playoffs type thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, you could really like position yourself to be competitive, which is what your goal should be, because you don't have most of your draft picks anyway. So like, if you were to tank it, this would be the 1 year you could tank, because next year is a swap, I believe, right? With the Rockets. And the Rockets are going to be bad.
I know like the leverage question is kind of all over the place. I see people on both sides of it. Like, do the Nets have leverage? Does Durant have leverage? I think the Nets have leverage because, like you just said, like, if the Nets suck next year, let's just say they said Durant and Kyrie the whole year. The Nets have a swap with Houston this year, and Houston isn't going to be any, like, maybe they make like a nice push somewhere.
They're going to be a bottom 5 team. There's just too many good teams.
Yeah, so there's no swap. Like, there's no risk in the Nets holding them out. That's why I think they have the leverage more than people are letting on. The Nets could, in theory, suck this year. They'll still have their lottery pick and move on with it. It's the following year that they don't have a pick. So
sure,
I do think that that's kind of being lost in this leverage conversation that people are maybe overlooking.
And also the difference between, Kyrie's his own thing. I've said before, like, would not shock me if Kyrie sat out. He doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about any of this. He is his own unpredictable self. Kevin Durant, I think, is a different story. Like, I don't think that he is Ben Simmons. I don't think he is Kyrie Irving. Like, I think that he cares about his basketball legacy. He doesn't want people to think that he's just like completely quitting on the team. He's 34 years old. He is someone who, could potentially basically rewrite his legacy over the next few years, whether it's with the Nets or with another team. Like, I don't see a situation where he's sitting out, but at the same time, as we said before, like, I also don't see a situation where he comes back and everything's great. So now it's like, there are a few teams that have been mentioned. Let's just talk about the 2 teams that are like the teams he actually wants to go to, because, obviously we would get a report like a week ago that's like, well, KD wants to go to Miami, but he also wants to play with Bam, Jimmy, Lowry. I'm like, well, that's not how these things work. Like, that's literally, it's impossible to do that. So like even just from a salary matching standpoint, you can't do that. So let's talk about Phoenix and Miami. Of Phoenix and Miami, which team do you think could, like, I still think both teams are a massive long shot on this, but like, of the 2 deals, I guess you could say, which of those teams would appeal more to you as a Nets fan getting back the return?
I mean, like you just said, you think they're both long shots. Neither really, settle my appetite, I guess, for a trade package. I wouldn't do either. I do think, though, Phoenix has more assets that could be moved elsewhere, and like, a Phoenix deal can be expanded where they have enough of like good pieces, including Aiden, which that's a whole nother thing. If Aiden just signs an offer sheet, I don't see how Phoenix gets this done. But
with the Pacers today, he could do it as early as today.
Yeah. So Phoenix, I know, like, they see Miami. To me, I just don't see a world where they make a deal. It literally makes no sense to me. Unless they get some ridiculous package together, I really just don't see it. They just don't.
So like, the minimum would have to be like Bam, Hero.
But you can't take Bam, because then you have to trade Simmons. So
and you're trading Simmons at the bottom of his value.
Exactly. So if you're taking on Bam and you turn Simmons into something else, like, sure, but a Phoenix one, which is like a 5-teamer, complex Aiden sign and trade, the Nets end up with like fine, like, I guess like McCall Bridges, Cam Johnson, and like Miles Turner, because Aiden gets rerouted left and right. Like, you do that and you get picks, like, that just doesn't do it for me. That's like not what Kevin Durant commands. Because, like, I like McCall Bridges. He's tops out as like a 3 on a good team. Like,
3 or 4.
He's really good, but like, it's Kevin Durant we're talking about. So Miami, to me, no. I like nothing. I want nothing to do with whatever they're going to put together. Phoenix, if it like expands and it becomes a really complicated deal, and like I have to like read through the terms 6 times, maybe I could be sold on it, but it still doesn't do it for me. The real ones that get I
was just gonna say, I think the best case scenario is that it gets solved in the next few days. Ayton like has a team that he wants to go to. that is interested in him and will give up real assets to get him. Not just like, oh, we'll send you like random center X and maybe a protected first round pick or something. Like there's like a sign and trade bidding war basically for Ayton. And really what you're hoping for is that the Jazz blow it up in the next week. Because if the Jazz choose to just go full fire sale, then you're like, then you could talk yourself into it, because then Mitchell becomes a possibility if you can move Simmons. Because once again, you can't have multiple guys, which is the dumbest rule I've ever heard.
Where did it, like, who was in like the negotiation room? Like, you don't want to know what we should like. We shouldn't let these guys all be on the same team. That's stupid.
Apparently, it was like an anti-super teams thing that Windhorst said. Like they like tried to make it so that like basically guys can't sign their extension and then immediately force a trade and be like, I want to go team up with my buddy on Miami or LA or whatever it is, which makes a little bit of sense to me, but also at the same time, like, in a situation like this where like the Nets are going to get worse pretty much no matter what they do in the immediate future. Like it's not a super team. It's the opposite. If anything, you're helping create a super team on the other end.
Yeah.
So I look at it like another fucking John Carnchard tweet. Enough. But I look at it like if you are a Nets fan and you're hoping for the best player you could possibly get back, Donovan Mitchell is the best guy that like I think you could possibly get. He's a top 20 player. You know, he might be a fake superstar, but like he at least is still young enough that like I think he's going to continue to get better. There's a chance that Donovan Mitchell is like Damian Lillard, right? Where like he just keeps getting better until he's 30 years old. He becomes he's a pretty lethal pull-up shooter. He's not quite as good of a shooter and shot creator as Dame is, but like he's a very, very good guy that you can build around. Like that is the ideal thing where like the Jazz are like, all we care about is just stacking picks Oklahoma City style. And we just want to get as many prospects on rookie deals or just extended that we can keep here for 4 to 8 years or whatever it is. And then Mitchell gets sent to the Nets and then Simmons gets sent elsewhere.
Do you buy, and to me, I think Utah is a team that factors into this whole Durant thing because like you just said, like, the Nets want back like an all-star proven star, and I think Mitchell qualifies that. That's kind of like the best, most attainable guy I think the Nets could actually get. Obviously, wouldn't be Durant to Utah. It would be like some massive deal, probably Phoenix involved and
like
stuff.
Like a 5 or 6 team deal, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that Mitchell, like in the right setting, like I think Mitchell was kind of screwed over by how Utah was kind of created. And like, I don't know, like, Dame, he could have reached heights. Like, do you think Mitchell could be a 1 on a very good team? Because I think so. Like, I
think so. Yeah,
he's young.
He's really good.
Yeah, like I was talking myself into Mitchell, and you've
been watching Thinking Basketball videos? You've been watching some Ben Taylor? You've been grinding the playoff superstar video?
I was just like looking over his basketball, and just like a quick overview, and I was like, he averaged like 26, almost 5 and 5 last year. Like, I think the way Utah fell apart is almost like kind of overlooking how like he's really good. Like, he's really fucking good, Donovan Mitchell. Like, he's someone where if the Nets acquired Donovan Mitchell and then went with like a bunch of wings, like oversized wings to compensate for how small he is, not the Nets are going to be a title contender, but like that's a team that could still hang in the Eastern Conference playoff picture, not tear it down. And you get like a star that like, at least like as a fan, like I could be like, all right, we got Donovan Mitchell. Like that's dope. He's cool. Like he can go
and
for 40.
Also he has a lot of friends. That's a big thing to me. Like he's got a ton of friends around the league, and like the fact that he has friends and like he wants to be in New York. Now the rumor is he wants to play for the Knicks or the Heat, but like you could sell him on the Nets thing, try to make a competitive team around him, and then try to get him when he's like really at his peak or his prime, like recruiting his guys to the Nets. Like that would be the most ideal scenario for you guys. My thing is that I think that Utah they have to blow it up sometime in the next year.
That was my other question. There's no way they're keeping Mitchell, right? Like that's all. That's
how could they keep Mitchell when you look at that roster now and you go, okay, you got rid of Royce O'Neal, who was your starting small forward. You let Daniel House walk, who was playing real playoff minutes for you. You traded Rudy Gobert for a bunch of bench players.
Mm-hmm.
And then you haven't made any other tangible moves in the offseason that you could say, okay, we got you this center to replace that might fit better with you offensively than Rudy Gobert. Or maybe, even if you traded for like Miles Turner or someone that is like you could at least sell the lie to Donovan Mitchell, because he apparently went to them and said like, what's the plan? Because I know him and Rudy weren't fucking best friends. They got into shit all the time, but like Rudy's still a really good player, and like just trading him for basically draft capital and salary filler, maybe like you feel good about like Jared Vanderbilt or like whoever was you got back in that trade, like maybe Walker Kessler or whatever. But like, it's, to me, like, I think that if that Jazz team is what they go into the playoffs with next year, I don't think they make the play
team
in the Western Conference. Absolutely not. Game. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I look at it like, I do think they have to blow it up, but I also think that Ainge is super patient and waits for the right moment to strike, where he's like, I'm going to get this massive haul. Like, if I had to guess right now, my guess is that the Heat, the Knicks, and the Nets have been calling Ainge like, what will it take? Because the Nets are in a situation where it's like, we want to get you involved in this trade. We want to make it work so that KD can get to where he wants to go. You guys can get a bunch of shit back, and then we can get Mitchell. So that is kind of like, let's say you guys got back like Mitchell, Bridges, and a bunch of picks or whatever.
Like I think that is like real. Now that was like a really roundabout way of us talking about like 5 different topics to come back to Phoenix and say, if they got back Mitchell,
that's where he wants to go too.
Yeah, if they got back again, I don't even know like what the exact trade is and stuff. Like I don't want to do it like while I'm talking, but like if they got back Mitchell, Bridges, and got back like almost a net neutral on their picks from Houston, like yeah, I could rock with that, because then like you have a young star you could build around. Bridges, I think he could take another step, but like I think he's a little, ceiling capped. And like one other nice piece, like, yeah, then we're kind of, I could live with that. The Nets are still somewhat in the playoff mix. They could sell out to the fan base, and, we try to hopefully put this all behind us, because Mitchell's what, like 25? He's so young. Like
25, 26. Yeah. I mean, he's still really young. So that is like your best case scenario. That is like Utah decides to blow it up like instantly, like not like what their ownership is saying, like have an all-star for next season or whatever. And then Phoenix basically is just like, we'll send all of our draft capital, anything you want, whatever we get back for Ayton. And then for salary, it might have to be a Ben Simmons to Utah situation, because otherwise, how does that work? Because you can't have Mitchell and Simmons on the same team, just like you can't have Bam and Simmons on the same team. So
the issue for like the Jazz getting involved, because I was playing around with like getting the Lakers involved with Kyrie and sending Russ places. Like if it's going to be a Nets, Jazz, Suns trade, 2 teams need to benefit. Like 2 teams need to be like paid off for that, while the Suns are the ones paying. Like another team needs to be involved in that. That's where this Aiden sign-in trade really gets tricky, because you almost need a team that wants Aiden and is willing to give up draft capital to go to either Brooklyn or Utah, figure that out later. But like, it's an uneven, like who's getting paid and who's doing the paying, because the Suns are kind of capped in their assets. So
also the Pacers have $31 million in cap space right now. So they could just make an offer sheet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if they make an offer sheet for 8 and the Suns just aren't willing to match that, which by the way, they should, because if you just let Ayton walk for nothing, you're not getting Kevin Durant.
And your team isn't going to be very good. Like Aiden's, Aiden's not very good. Like, you're not going to be good anyway.
Yeah.
So I do think ultimately with a Suns related package, it's going to end up being like a 5-team deal, whether it includes Utah or includes someone else. Like the Suns just don't have anything really that appealing. They have good add-on pieces, but they don't have the one piece that's really going to make me be like, that's fun. So again,
they don't even have the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the Paul George trade. Yeah. Like the only one they have is Booker, and they're not giving up Booker. So
so it's tricky for me to see, unless the Nets really cave and want to wipe their hands clean of this, for the Suns to put together a competitive package that could outbid like a New Orleans or a Toronto, where I think if they get in the mix, I really think that they make a compelling offer. I really think that the Pelicans and Raptors, they have exactly what the Nets are looking for in terms of young pieces, nice role players, and they have their full allotment of picks. Why would the Nets talk with the Suns when the Suns have like half of that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, let's talk about like what we talked about pre-podcast, which is it's the same thing that we brought up earlier. Like, how much better are the Suns with Booker? The guys that they would have left after they make this trade, just from like a salary matching perspective, giving up all their picks, all the like role players they have on their team, Cam Johnson, A.N. Bridges, all that shit. Anything that anyone could possibly want.
Mm.
Then you're looking at a team where the starting five is pretty good still. Starting five is very good still. Chris Paul, who's 38 years old now. Devin Booker, who is one of the best young players in the NBA. Kevin Durant, a small forward, who's Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
Jay Crowder, who's a very good role player. And then, like, your center's like Bismack Biyombo, which is very weird. And, like, I don't know how that's going to work, which is strange in itself. But, like, whatever, you can live with that. The rest of that team is, like, pretty bad. Like, if you want to roll into the playoffs with, like, Landry Shamet as your best bench player, or like
they're small too. They honestly look a lot like the Nets from last year.
Yeah.
Campaign, like you just said, Landry Shamet. Like, that team is, I mean, they're good. Obviously, you have Kevin Durant. You're going to be great.
The top three guys are great, especially if CP isn't washed.
Yeah, but first of all, CP3 could go. He could go at any moment. I know he had a great year last year, but like not a ton of floor spacing there, in my opinion. That's a lot of mid-range players for me. Very undersized. You look at, I mean, the Lakers, you never know. The Lakers could go on a tear. Like, regular season-wise, the Lakers could, if they won a bunch of games, that wouldn't surprise me. If AD comes out healthy and wants to play, I don't know. But
I think the rest of that team, unless they get Kyrie, I think the rest of that team sucks, to be honest. I think AD and LeBron.
Minnesota's going to be a regular season juggernaut. They just are going to be. They're so big, they're going to be. So Minnesota, the Clippers, if they're healthy, the Nuggets, I almost would argue the Nuggets, I might be betting on them futures wise. I think that they're pretty loaded, assuming everyone's healthy. The
Warriors,
the defending champion Warriors. Like, the Suns are in this crowded mix. Like,
sure,
I wouldn't say like I'm confident in their title chances. And like, is Durant really gonna like spite how much he hates Joe Tsai and whoever else? Meanwhile, people are talking about the Suns like there's some like awesome situation. Like, they're great. The Suns have been like the laughing stock of the league for like well over a decade. They just stumbled into CP3 and Devin Booker got really good. Like, their GM just said that they don't pay attention to the draft. And their owner is a bona fide scumbag. Like, literally the worst. He's like the worst guy ever. So like,
he shouldn't even be able to own the team. He's such a scumbag.
Bro, like, don't give me this bullshit that like the Suns are some sick situation or whatever. Like, what are you talking about? That's why like culture and all that, like, it's you build a culture. I think Steve Jones, like the Twitter guy who says all the time, like, you build a culture to sell to superstars to get the superstars, and then the culture becomes shit. Look at LeBron every time he leaves.
Of course, yeah.
I don't buy this. Like, Phoenix needs to be the spot. Like, oh my God, need Phoenix. Like, give me a break. They're all.
It's just the fact that KD wants to go there is why it is being talked in that way. I'm with you in that regard. Like, I think the Devin Booker thing is like players really like Devin Booker. And he's really good. But, like, I do think that Devin Booker gets a little bit overrated on the whole. Like, you know, like, he needed CP. What's up?
Go to Dallas. Like, go play with Luka. Culture?
Yeah, like, my whole thing is, like, I think that the fact that, like, Booker is in the same breath as Luka, to me, is, like, kind of ridiculous in itself. But my whole thing on this is, like, that team would be really good, very top-heavy, very similar to kind of, like, the end of that Warriors run, but not with Steph Curry as like, you know, like you have Steph Curry, who's still, especially a few years ago, was still one of the top 5 players in the NBA. As good as Booker and CP are, they're not top 5 players. They're more like top 15 players. Mm-hmm. And who knows if Chris Paul declines, like, you know, I think that they would be a very good competitive team. I don't think they're the clear favorites by any means. I think that I think that if obviously Phoenix could do that deal, they should do that deal. But I don't think that it's some foregone conclusion that they're like instantly title favorites. So that's the first tier of teams with like Miami and Phoenix, which is where he apparently wants to go. I think that I actually would say, like, with the way that Jimmy Butler played in the playoffs, by the way, you shouldn't be interested in that Miami package by any means, because Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, they're nice players, but like they do nothing for me if I'm trading Kevin Durant. I do look at it as like, I could maybe see a Jimmy Butler and Kevin Durant led team with the Heat's system and with the Heat's front office's ability to get guys on the margins, because like, The Suns don't get guys on the margins. Like the
Nope.
Suns literally are just like you said, they don't pay attention to the draft. They don't go after like undrafted free agents or like find guys from the G League. They're literally just been like Chris Paul and Devin Booker merchants over the last few years.
Yeah.
And like I always said when when they took Jalen Smith, and like I like Cam Johnson as a prospect, so I didn't hate that trade as much, even though I was like, why don't you just trade back like 10 spots and get the same guy, like get the guy there? Like it didn't make any sense to me. I was always like, it's easy to get role players. It's hard to get like develop stars in the way that Devin Booker has developed. It's hard to do the things that this front office didn't do. It was all like kind of gifted to them. Like, oh, Chris Paul wants to come here and he wants to play with Devin Booker. And like, oh, Devin Booker, you didn't draft Devin Booker. And like, by the time you got there, he was finally good.
Yeah.
Like my whole thing with Phoenix is like, I don't believe in their front office to build out a competent team in the same way that I would be in like a Miami if they could somehow pull this off. But at the same time, like I'm not doing that. Like Bam's going to make you very competitive in the regular season, give you a very good defense. But like, he doesn't change my world if I'm the Nets, and I wouldn't even entertain an offer from them. So, yeah. And the difference between Phoenix and Miami, we should say, is that Phoenix has a full draft pick haul they could send, and they have stuff that they could get for and that they could send. Whereas Miami doesn't have nearly as much in that regard. And also Miami's just always good. So why do you want their future draft picks? Like they're just literally
Miami will always remain relevant, where Phoenix, you could see like a bottom and drop. You could see like at the end of the tunnel, you could kind of pounce on that. Yeah, I mean, in terms of packages, Phoenix outshines Miami, but like it's going from like bad to like not so great, in terms of like trade packages.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay, so let's move into the second tier teams, which is like the teams that have prospects that you want, because the teams that are the thing that the Nets are looking for is like players. They don't want picks. There's really no point in rebuilding. This upcoming year is the only year where you can like afford to be somewhat bad and like still get a high draft pick probably, because Houston's going to be pretty good in a few years. And also you don't own your own draft picks half of those years anyway. So now we move into the second tier of teams, which I have my second tier of teams of Boston, New Orleans, and Toronto. Is there anyone so like of those teams, how would you rank like the packages that you would want back for Kevin Durant from like, okay, we have, whatever prospect is on Boston, New Orleans, or Toronto, like what would be your number one package from those teams?
So top to bottom, I think I'd go New Orleans. This is obviously like the ideal package, right? Like high end, this like the upside is what I'm looking for. I'd probably go New Orleans, Toronto, Boston.
Okay. So let's talk about New Orleans.
One, and then Boston and Toronto. You could kind of flip those a little bit more. But I think New Orleans has the best package of any team.
You want Ingram?
I think a package of Ingram. I think I said this to you last time, but Ingram, Nance, Herb Jones, and like a mess of picks. I'm not going to try and sift through. I want this one. Like, get me back to net neutral with my picks.
They had like 13 first-round picks.
Yeah, New Orleans has the capability to satisfy what I'm looking for in terms of potential all-star in Ingram, I think. Guy who's showed in the playoffs he could play. Nice role player in Herb Jones who has upside. And, good guy. I kind of just like him in general, Larry Nance. That's fine. That satisfies the salary. And then you could get me all my picks back. You could build with that. And I'm pretty sure Ingram could come with Simmons, right?
Yes. That was the one piece that I was like, okay, this makes this trade the most interesting to me if I'm looking from the Nets perspective. Because I learned that on a podcast I was listening to yesterday. I was listening to an athletic podcast, and the New Orleans reporter was like, or it might have been the Hoop Collective, was like, actually, Brandon Ingram is the only one of the second-year max guys that can be traded to the Nets while they still have Ben Simmons, because he didn't extend immediately. He got to free agency. He waited. Then he ended up becoming a max guy. So you can actually have Ingram's Simmons, and then whatever you get back for Kyrie, which is like more like you probably get draft picks from the Lakers or those two draft picks from the Lakers.
So I don't think the Nets are really interested in Russ, just based on all reporting. They are going to try and reroute him to a third team, which thank God. But I think I said this one on like the Forgotten podcast, our lost tape, where I was like, you could sell this like 2016 draft Simmons, Ingram 1-2. Like you could sell me on Ingram and Simmons. That's a young team with upside. Get your picks back. no, you're probably not going to be a title contender for a while. But like, that's a good young team with upside. Like, I want to end on this with like a player that gives me like hope that they could be good again. You know, I don't want like we'll get into the Raptors back, but like Pascal Siakam does nothing for me. I have zero, could not have less interest in Pascal Siakam. Forget that he is one of the
careful. Raptors fans might see this.
Oh my God, I got flamed over the weekend over some of my Raptors. Some guy replied to me, if Masai trades Scotty Barnes for Kevin Durant, he should be fired. I go like, oh my God. Just muted the tweet. But like, to me,
it's Kevin Durant.
Siakam, like, what is Pascal Siakam as like a lone one gonna do for me? Like, he's a good player. He's third team All NBA this year or whatever.
Sure.
But like, come on. Like, he's already like kind of towards his more advanced age.
I'm lower on Siakam than most. I feel
so
like
I don't see it at all. He's a human bee button. He just spins. That's it.
I'm sorry. If you get locked up by Tobias Harris and have to get ball screened to death so you can switch onto George Niang and Tyrese Maxey, I don't believe in you. Like, that's just like he's a very good player, but like, once again, we're trading Kevin fucking Durant. Don't miss me with the Pascal Siakam talk.
Ingram satisfies my kind of top requirement. Like, check the box. Like, future should be an all-star. Like, first of all, I think Brandon Ingram, like, there's like, maybe I'm just like sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit, but like the way the Pelicans turned it around this year and the way he played in that playoffs, like, they had the Suns on the ropes.
Sure.
And like, we're talking, everyone called him Baby Durant. Like, maybe bringing Baby Durant for real Durant. Like, I could, like, again, you could talk me into an Ingram centered package. You could do. You're
going through psychosis. I understand. No, I get it. No, but I do just want to say, well, first off, there is context to that Booker didn't play in some of those games. So like, yeah, I think the Suns probably
they were outmatched for sure.
Sure. And like, look, I've been higher on Brandon Ingram than most people. I was like, I would give up whatever we need to, with Ben Simmons other than Tyrese Maxey, to get Brandon Ingram back a few months ago. Like, I was like, I like Brandon Ingram a lot. And like, if you look at like my whole thing with Ingram is like, I think he probably tops out best as a 2, like a Chris Middleton type, where like he's like a complementary piece to a real superstar. But like, look, the situation that you're in right now, like, you know, you can take what you can get. Like, Ingram is still somehow only going to be 25 next year, which hurts my brain to think about. Like, he's always getting better. He's a really hard worker. You can sell it. It's fine. Plus, you're going to get other stuff with him. You're not just getting Brandon Ingram. Let's talk about it from the Pelicans' perspective of like, that might be the one team. There are like 2 teams where I feel like, to me, the 2 teams that I think have realistic packages that could sell themselves on being a title contender because of what they have left. Obviously Phoenix, but I don't think their package is realistic. Of the realistic teams, I think Boston and New Orleans are the 2 teams that are deep enough, and have enough top end talent. Like, if Zion, the real question mark is Zion. They just maxed Zion for 5 years, so they obviously can't trade him. But if they're maxing him for 5 years, they think he's going to be healthy. They think that he's going to be back to where he was. And like, by the way, people forget this because he just missed a whole season, but like, Zion was a top 20 player at 20 years old and was legitimately amazing.
Him and Durant are like, that's a scary, like, that's
great
crazy.
Duo. Yeah, offensively, that's a crazy duo. Yeah.
And like, the tea leaves are there. Like, to answer your question, I kind of cut you off, but to answer your question, I think New Orleans could talk themselves into it. One, they have a very aggressive general manager in David Griffin. He is always willing to risk it to win. He is one of those GMs that is not afraid to go for it. You have a coach in Willie Green who comes in highly respected. He just got this team to overachieve last year after a bad start. You still have CJ McCollum handling the ball. Like, they have a lot of pieces that could put together a really strong, like, I know the West is crowded, but like, with the upside of Zion and Durant as like the proven commodity, I mean, that's a scary team that like, they could beat you in a handful of ways. They could beat you in more ways than like a Phoenix Durant team can, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, they would be fucking loaded. Defensively, I think there would be a lot of concerns. I think if you keep Jonas Valanciunas in this trade, you have Jonas Valanciunas, who's a decent drop coverage center. You would have Kevin Durant, who, when he's in the past, he's shown that he can be a good playoff defender, but like, more recently, not as much. But also, he had a large offensive load. He wouldn't have as large of an offensive load in New Orleans if he had CJ McCollum and Zion Williams in there. But like defensively, that team's going to be bleeding points for sure, especially if they have to give up Herb Jones and Larry Nance, who are probably their two best defenders. So like the way you would talk yourself out of that, I just talked with my buddy Andrew from Sports Drink, who's a big Pelicans fan. He was like, my fear with that trade is like, you go with like you get rid of Ingram, who's been like the guy through all of this that you got. He's the guy you got back for Anthony Davis. And like, of course, it's Kevin Durant. You make the trade if you need to make the trade.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's like, my fear is that like they make this trade, they have 2 or 3 years while Durant is still Durant, and like they can be competitive, but like it doesn't guarantee that they win the West. It throws their hat in there. And then in a few years from now, you go, okay, Zion might want out. And like, what are we left with? CJ McCollum's aged out. Kevin Durant's aged out. It would be a real push in the chips move for a team that has literally never done that because they're a small market. But at the same time, he was like, it could help the basketball culture a lot in New Orleans because he's like, people just don't give a shit about the Pelicans there, basically. He's like, they care more about college football on a Thursday night than a Pelicans game if you're literally in the neighborhood of the arena. Like, that's how much they don't care about the Pelicans. But at the same time, like, if you do that, like that, like I would probably make that move if I'm the Pelicans because you've never been relevant. Like, you've just never been relevant, dude. Like, they've literally never been. The only thing they're known for is guys getting upset and leaving. Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, Zion's on his way there. Like, the only argument for keeping Ingram would be like, hey, here's the one guy who actually wants to be here, and you're shipping him off the instant you get the chance, which is, you know, it happens in the NBA sometimes. But like, to me, if I think my team's good enough, even giving up all those pieces, and I get Kevin Durant back, I'm fucking doing it. It's Kevin Durant, dude. It's fucking Kevin Durant.
I completely agree with you. One, I guess, counter from what you said, I don't think that the Pelicans need to gut their roster. They have hit on a ton of draft picks.
Sure.
Trey Murphy's looking like he's going to be at least a rotation player. People love Dyson Daniels, you know. Even if you want to turn in other like, you still have moves to make. Like, I think it might have been Bill and Russillo. They were talking about, maybe it was Zach Lowe. I don't know. I listened to so many podcasts this week after like the long weekend. But they were talking about how like the Timberwolves made like their all-in move. Like, they don't even have like the one, like the extra move now. Like, this is like their move.
Right.
The Pelicans would still have ammo to make another move on top of this, whether it's Valanciunas' contract. And I still think Valanciunas has turned into a really like nice player, in my opinion. And then also their young picks. And it's not like they're giving up all their assets. They have so many draft picks that they'll be kind of they'll go from like surplus to neutral, you know,
right.
And then soon trade him.
You also have Devontae Graham's contract that you can move.
Yeah,
he apparently just got a DUI today, so that's not great. But
I don't think that the Pelicans need to necessarily gut their roster and gut their, you know, asset, like their treasure chest, just to get Durant, which is why I think they're such an attractive trade partner. Is
Makes
that
sense.
They could get Durant and still operate and move and get a little bit better. And so that's why I think the Pelicans are a clear number one. I think it's interesting, though, you don't think Toronto, they would have enough to be a title contender if they were to make the move.
Okay, so here's
Boston. I agree with you with Boston, by the way. If it was like Tatum and Durant, you're good. You're set. You're fine.
Yeah, of course. So here's my thing with Toronto. I think Toronto has a lot of good young talent. I think they're an interesting team. I think there's a narrative out there that Masai is this super aggressive GM that just is not true at all. Like, how is the Kawhi move aggressive in literally any way? He gave up nothing to get one of the 30 best basketball players of all time. Like, DeMar DeRozan's a very good player, but like, that team was at the end of the road. They were better with him on the bench than when he played. He was a disaster in the playoffs, and he turned DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a late first round pick into Kawhi Leonard. Even for 1 year, any GM would fucking do that. Yeah. And especially that. Okay, so another thing that gets lost in there. Danny Green was still really good when they got Danny Green, and he was a throw-in in that trade. So that was a masterclass by Masai. I'm not saying that wasn't a brilliant fucking trade. What I'm saying is that team also had Kyle Lowry. They had, funny enough, Jonas Valanciunas on the team, and they knew they could trade him, who they traded him for Marc Gasol as their other all-in move at the deadline. Yeah. They had Pascal Siakam on the come-up, Fred VanVleet on the come-up, OG Anunoby on the come-up. And I feel, and Serge Ibaka, who is still really good.
Yeah, Serge
look at this Raptors roster, and if they give up what they need to give up for Kevin Durant, they're not like title favorites by any means. And I don't even think, and as good as the East was that year, Like, that could have been a disaster in itself. And I think that team, after they traded for Kawhi, was way better than what Kevin Durant, if you were to give up like Scotty Barnes, maybe with OG Anunoby, or if you keep OG Anunoby out and you send every single pick with Gary Trent Jr. or whatever, like I look at that team and I go, wow, it's kind of similar to the Phoenix situation where I go, I don't even think their top end talent's as good as Phoenix top end talent, but like the rest of their roster is pretty thin. And like maybe Masai could pull some shit out of his ass where he gets a guy, but like we're now talking about Precious Achiuwa being the starter on a finals winning team. Like that's the situation you're in. Like their bench isn't super deep. Like look at their bench. Chris Boucher, like they're fine players. But
Otto.
Like, yeah, Otto was a good pickup. I like that pickup for them. Yeah, for sure. Like I'm not saying that that's a bad team by any means. If they just give up Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr., and a ton of picks, then that is 100% a contender with Siakam, KD, Fred VanVleet, and if you can keep OG, 100%, they're definitely a contender. But my whole thing is like, I don't think it's this surefire move for them because I think that like the team's still pretty thin beyond those guys. Otto Porter Jr., he's always hurt. You can't really rely on him. You know, Thad Young's like an okay bench guy. Chris Boucher's an okay bench guy. Precious Achiuwa is a decent like young player, but like I just look at it like I don't think Pascal Siakam's going to be nearly as effective when he's off the ball when you have Kevin Durant.
Yeah,
I don't think I don't think it's like this no-brainer trade. But obviously, if I were like Masai and I thought that I could make this move, but it like his history suggests he actually doesn't make super aggressive moves. Like he doesn't make all-in trades unless it's that 1 year where everything lined up perfectly.
It weirdly, like, let me start by saying this deal doesn't get done without Scotty Barnes. There's a reason why, like, the reporting has quickly become the Raptors are balking at putting Scotty Barnes in the trade.
Sure.
Because he needs to be in the trade. You know what I mean? Like, people were, like, flaming me. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, first of all, Scotty Barnes, great young player. Love him. Great pick when like everyone thought it was like a 4-player draft. They took Scotty. He was great rookie of the year. The odds of Scotty Barnes becoming as good as Kevin Durant is like incredibly low. Like it's so low. It just is.
Even this version of Kevin Durant.
Exactly. It's so low. Like you need, to me, the swing piece is, do I put an OG? Because like you were just saying, like this team is kind of thin if they get Durant because of what they likely need to give up to get Durant. Sure. So it's more a question of, do the Raptors, because I think the Raptors have a very attractive package, but I'm looking from the Nets lens. It's do the Raptors look at it like we're actually giving up too much that we're not going to get our necessary returns on our investment on Durant because we're giving up OG, Gary Trent, Scotty, and a handful of picks. Like, yeah, maybe you could hit on the margins, but like you make a good point. The Siakam Durant fit isn't, it's not great.
It's all right.
Have a great coach, though, and Nurse. Sure. Trust him to figure it out.
And you'd have a bunch of good defenders around Kevin Durant, which is always a good thing.
I agree.
Offensively might be a little bit stagnant, but
I agree with you that I actually think, weirdly, the Raptors need to like have like, take a minute and think about their risk of going in, because you agree with me. Like this deal doesn't get done without Scotty. If not, it's like a robbery.
In what world are you trading Pascal Siakam at 28?
To me like I'm nuts. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, are you?
Of course. Well, first off, you're dealing with Raptors fans who are the most irrational people on the internet. But second off, like, if I'm the Nets and you have, so this has been the whole thing with like negotiating with the Pelicans or the Nets, or the Raptors, or one of these teams that has a good young guy that you really want. They don't give a fuck about the picks. They don't give a fuck about whatever. I want the tangible guy who's good right
you need
fucking
to still
now.
Compete if you're the Nets. You still need not compete for a title, but like be in the playoffs, maybe play in, but like be relevant. The Nets can't sink back to the bottom. So you need a Scotty Barnes guy that you could say, hey, we lost Kevin, but like look at him. Rookie of the year. He did it. Like this is Scotty. Meet him. So me, I agree with you. It feels like the Raptors, though, I can't tell if Woj continues to say it, because like you're trying to like see which every reporter is trying to like make happen, like for what's his motive. Windhorst keeps throwing in the Pelicans. Woj keeps, I'm sorry, I have a landscaper outside, so I don't know if that's picking up.
No, you're chilling.
Or the Pelicans, like Windhorst keeps saying the Pelicans, Woj keeps saying the Raptors like lurking in the mix. I can't tell if he's just doing that on behalf of the Nets.
Right.
And like saying, oh, well, like got to up that offer. Like the Raptors, they're in the mix, and like they may eventually give up Scotty. So I'm trying to see through it. I do think the Raptors, though, if they come to terms with parting with Scotty, this deal gets done one way or another.
Okay. So once again, I think it's a low chance. I actually think it's a better chance that Boston or New Orleans or one of these teams is just like, fuck it, let's push in all our chips than the Raptors. Because once again, I don't know if that Raptors team is good enough if they get Durant.
They're still far away.
It's certainly a good team. And like, look, you could talk yourself into it. But like, once again, when they made the move for Kawhi, they didn't give up a Scotty Barnes level prospect. And they also didn't give up a ton of draft capital. And they also didn't have like Norman Powell as like the 10th best player on the team. Like that's the major difference to me, where like they already had everything in line to make that like really good run that they made back in 18-19 that I'm not 100% sold on that they would if they traded for a 34-year-old Kevin Durant. So let's just talk very briefly about the Celtics, because I've been saying I don't think the Celtics will do it. I just still am like, you're coming off the finals. The optics of it would be really bad to be like coming off the finals. Jalen Brown gets better every year. Like he would have to be the guy that's included. But is there any package from, so like we have New Orleans is 1, Toronto is 2, Celtics is 3, I assume.
Yeah. To me, it's Jalen, and we spoke about this, like Ingram and Jalen Brown. That's kind of like my floor of who I'm accepting as a piece. I do like Jalen Brown. Showed a lot in the finals. I do think he needs to learn how to dribble a little bit better, but I think he's really good. To me, though, the package from the Celtics, it's what? I don't even know if this goes through or not, but you got what? Jalen, Smart, Time Lord, and
I was gonna say, is it because right now what the Celtics have been doing is like fleecing teams of like, we're not giving up basically anything to get back. Like, I mean, who knows if the Malcolm Brogdon thing, like with his health and stuff, but like they're basically like, we're not giving up any of our core pieces unless we know we're getting back like a Kevin Durant level player. So I would be hesitant to do both Time Lord and Smart from them.
I agree, but like that has to be the deal, right? Like,
or something like that, where like maybe you can swap in, because look, maybe you can talk them into like swapping in.
That like, deal also doesn't work. Then that's what I have to send out a little bit more. But
okay, whatever. You throw in. Yeah, I mean, although I guess
that's a later issue, but
although the salary is like kind of like you got to give up someone good to make that work. But let's just say it's one of Time Lord or Smart. Let's just say like they're like, we want Brown, Smart, Grant Williams, and picks. Like,
but those picks are going to be bad. Like those picks are like confirmed bad, because like,
are they though? Because think about it like this: are they confirmed bad? They can't give, so they just traded for Malcolm Brogdon for next year's pick, so they can't trade next year's pick. So there's less picks available to trade. But my whole thing is like, are we guaranteed that Boston's picks are going to be bad? Because Kevin Durant's old, Al Horford's old, Jason Tatum's the only one left there, and that's possibly why they would say we are not going to do this deal, is because if we have to give up, and like Time Lord, even if you keep Time Lord, like his injury concerns, like the bottom could fall out there, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Boston,
in a few years.
To me, Boston, it feels a little, I think it's probably the least likely for both sides, like you just said, but also the Raptors and Pelicans just could offer better packages than Boston. Like to me, like a Jalen Brown, even let's just say all 3, right? They give up all of those guys. Like, what is that going to get you? Like, they're good. They just went to the finals, but they also had Jason Tatum leading the way. They had Al Horford taking steroids and being awesome. Like, they had a lot of things break their way.
Sure.
So, I don't know if that 3 really does much. They, again, fringy playoff. Like, what's the upside with, like, Smart? Time Lord's really good, but, like, Smart, I still think Smart's closer to, like, a 5th guy than a 3rd guy. You know, it doesn't sit that well with me. And also, the timelines of Boston really kind of, they divert a little bit, whereas like the 2 Jays, for argument's sake, they're on the same timeline. They are together. They are linked, whatever. Like you could sell that long term, whereas like Durant might be here for a few years, then he's going to retire. Then all of a sudden it's Tatum alone and they don't have as many assets. And like, I don't know. I think Boston might be a little gun shy in this trade, even though it's typically they are an aggressive team, but that was also Ainge. This is Brad Stevens.
Right. And
they made aggressive moves this year to improve.
Sure.
This feels
but they're for role players giving up first round picks.
This is not aggressive. This is like,
this
we're all in.
Grand Slam swing.
Yeah, this is it now. We're going. I don't know if I'm not going to say Brad Stevens doesn't have the nuts to do it, but I don't know if Brad Stevens has the nuts to do it.
Okay, so I agree. I don't think they do it. Although I'm looking at that team and like the only issue there is like if you could somehow hold on to Time Lord, I might talk myself into that just because it's like then you still have
probably the swing piece.
Yeah, you still have Brogdon, you still have White, you still have like, although who knows how much you can trust White in the playoffs. Like you've made yourself into such a deep team that you might be able to sacrifice like those two guys, Smart and Brown, and maybe Williams off the bench, and then just be like, okay, we're gonna go jumbo big. We're gonna put Tatum at the 2, and we're gonna put Tatum at the 2. We're gonna put Durant at the 3. We're gonna put we're gonna put Horford at the 4 and Williams at the 5, and then Brogdon as your starting point guard. The smallest person there is 6'5". You're just a massive lineup. Like I could talk myself into that, but it is a massive risk that I don't think the Brad Stevens is going to take.
I don't know if the Nets would trade with the Celtics. I know they definitely want to trade with the Knicks. I kind of feel like the Celtics are also in that mix. Like, obviously the last trade, like all this stuff, like we just played the Celtics in back-to-back postseasons. Like I feel like obviously if they're the best deal, you take the best deal, but I could see the Nets trying to put off making this trade with the Celtics specifically.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I don't think they would make that trade either. I think that would have to be like the last, like worst case scenario for them. Like, where
and if that's the case, I see the Nets more likely taking some sort of Phoenix package with like a bunch of other teams and like throwing that all together than like trading one-on-one with the Celtics again. That would the optics of that for both sides would probably not be great.
True. All right, so we have that, and then there's just a few more things that I want to talk about here, which is the 2 wild card teams that I don't think are realistic, but I have to bring them up, and they wouldn't even be able to happen for a few months.
Okay.
So the Grizzlies and the Blazers. The Grizzlies is complicated because, one, I don't think that they're, like everyone's been saying, they're a little bit too high on their own supply when it comes to like guys they draft and develop, and like they love, like that's part of the fun for them is like building like
own supply.
Yeah, or like well, like look, like DeAnthony Melton, they just traded DeAnthony Melton for a prospect I like in David Roddy, but like, you know, you're not like David Roddy isn't guaranteed to be anything, but they just trust their scouting and their development so much that they think they can turn him into a guy, which fair enough. When you have to pay, you know, your guys and you're in a small market, like when Bane's contract kicks in and Jaw's contract and you already extended Jaren Jackson Jr., like maybe you want to save as much as you can on the margins and not extend a guy like Melton. Whatever. But like I still think Melton would make them a much better team next year than David Roddy. So I look at it like with the Grizzlies, the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury, just he's hurt again. And like it would have to be, by the way, I think it would have to be Jaren Jackson Jr., Bane, and stuff. Like I don't think it could just be like people would talk about like, oh, like, well, you could do Jaren Jackson Jr. and a bunch of stuff or Bane and a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, it would have to be both of them. And at that point, like maybe you just trust the Ja and Kevin Durant combo so much that you're just like, fuck it, we're going all in on like these 2 offensive superstars, and we're hoping that like Dylan Brooks and whoever else we can pull out of our ass in the draft and Jake LaRavia and whatever can like cover for them. But you're getting a little bit dicey there.
I don't see a Grizzlies package happening. I just now this Triple J injury, like you said, but like if we're like comparing packages, like Scotty Barnes is a much better prospect than either Bane or Triple J. And I like both. I like, again, this isn't a knock on them. That's what it is. You need to give up both of them if you want Kevin Durant. So I just don't see the Grizzlies making that type of move. I feel like they're cool doing what they're like. This is like a complete about face from what they've done in the past. Whereas the Blazers, on the other hand, I know there's a new GM in there, but it looks like they're being aggressive, and I could see them maybe getting in the mix. But I mean, what do you see that package being?
Well, I mean, it would have to be everything but Dame. Like, I mean, like it would have to be Simons.
They didn't have any. Like,
they have to wait a few months to be able to trade Simons. They'd have to 6 months because he just extended. But like
Simons doesn't do it for me though.
Okay, so Simons doesn't do it for you, then you're probably not interested in the trade. But it would have to be I
could see them getting aggressive though.
Simons, Sharp, Josh Hart. I'm like trying to think of like who's even on their team. Like
that would suck. The Nets would suck then.
Hold on, I'm
that
looking
would be
at
the worst package. Like
I'm probably one of the only. If you go back and you watch the stream, everyone was like, "How much did Anthony Simons get?" And I'm like, I think Anthony Simons is pretty good. Like
it's a contract.
He's not a superstar, but like he's 22 still, and like legitimately amazing on pull-ups, and like is a pretty good playmaker and ball handler. Like there's definitely something there. Now, if I'm trading Kevin Durant,
Jalen Brunson or Anthony Simons, I know what I would say.
Right now,
on their they have like a similar contract now.
Well, yeah, but Jalen Brunson's like 4 years older.
That's what I'm saying. I'd rather have Simons still.
Yeah. I'm saying like if I'm building a team, and like I'm trying to like I think Simon's ceiling is significantly higher than what Brunson's is. But like on this next contract, Brunson might give you more just because he's 26 and Simons is 22. And like he might not, like Simons might not be contributing to like high level basketball. Like his defense is really, really, really bad. Like he's like a Trey Young level defender. Like that's scary.
It's tough for the Nets. Like, again, we're talking about like selling this to the fans. You just traded Kevin Durant. Like you're getting Anthony Simons back as like the headliner. Like that's not doing it.
Right. Yeah.
Like neither is Triple J and Bane for that matter. You know what I mean? Like the Nets need to come away. And I mean, it's what they're requesting. They're asking for at least one all-star, a good role player, and a significant draft package. So you need a guy that like season ticket holder meeting, like meet and greet Sean Marks. Everyone's mad at him. And he goes, I know we gave up Kevin Durant, but we got this.
We got Anthony Simons.
We got Anthony Simons on an $100 million contract already. Like you need something that could sell the fan base, that could make me say, all right, like we can make the playoffs again and we could try and put this behind us.
Sure. All right. Yeah, no, I get that. I think those two teams are more of a long shot, but they're definitely going to be aggressive. Like it would have to be like every good young player they have plus every pick they have, like, which is like, if you believe in Shaedon Sharpe, I was going to say Mike. I joked that I was like, wouldn't it be funny if they just hired Mike Schmitz to be like the draft guy to like bring in Shaedon Sharpe and scout for them, and then they're like, hey, by the way, we just traded a decade worth of picks to get Kevin Durant, so your job is like kind of useless now.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, look, man. I will say I'm not crazy high on Shaedon Sharpe as like a future superstar, but if Mike Schmitz likes him, there's definitely something there because Mike Schmitz is super smart and like they're not drafting him if Mike Schmitz doesn't like him. So like there's at least something to build with there. But okay, so we can go down our packages and we could rank them now. So number 1 is the Pelicans, the Ingram package.
Yes.
Which is Ingram, Herb Jones, picks, and Nance. Okay, so that's like your number 1. That's kind of fits exactly the bill that you're talking about, like good all-star player, role players, and also that might have a little bit more upside in Herb Jones, and then draft picks, and they have a ton of draft picks. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Toronto, the Scotty Barnes package that would be like Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr. or OG. Because like if OG has to be included, I don't think Toronto does it. If it's Gary Trent Jr. in picks, then okay, maybe we can.
I would rather OG. I'm pretty high on OG, but I also do like Gary Trent. So. Like, again, if that's the swing piece and Gary Trent gets it on, I would still put that Toronto package pretty high because Scotty, to me, he does have all-star upside, and that's what we're trying to sell here.
Sure. So, okay, so Toronto 2, Boston 3, I assume, with the Jaylen Brown package?
Yeah, Boston would be 3.
Yeah.
But, like, I'd probably need all 3 of those guys.
Okay.
Brown,
and then because the picks aren't going to be that good. And then your long shot package is the Jazz deciding to blow it up, and then you just move at heaven and earth, including Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, to get Donovan Mitchell back as the main guy.
And Bridges and Cam Johnson. I know it's a lot, but like,
sure.
If you map it out on paper, it actually makes a little bit of sense. But
if you're just Charlie Kelly at the cork board and you're like,
that's literally
listen, I know, this was me during the Ben Simmons shit for 7-8 months. Like I was like pulling my fucking hair out trying to figure out a trade for this guy. All right, so before we get out of here, we need to laugh at the Lakers for a little bit, because Kyrie Irving, obviously the rumor is he wants to play for the Lakers. LeBron wants him. He wants to play there beyond next year. He wants to extend, blah, 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 all that shit. The Lakers reporters, like Dave McMenamin and Tim McMenamin, Dave McMenamin. Am I messing up?
Tim McMahon and Dave McMenamin.
There we go. Yeah. Dave McMenamin. Are like basically going out there, Windhorse too, being like, look, the Lakers have a very enticing package of Russell Westbrook, the worst contract in the NBA. Yeah. Talen Horton-Tucker, who isn't good. And by the way, stop selling Talen Horton-Tucker as a positive trade piece in trades. He's not a positive. Okay, let's just talk about the Talen Horton-Tucker thing, because everyone says he's a promising young player which that's arguable. I don't even know if he is. He's done nothing in the NBA outside of the preseason. 2, yes, he's 21 or 22 still, but like he's on his second contract because he was a second round pick. So they extended him for $9.5 million. And then he has a player option on not this upcoming year, but the next year. So if you trade for him and he's bad, you're like, fuck, now we got to pay this guy $9.5 million this year and next year. And if he's good, he can opt out and you got to pay him a bunch more money. Like, how is Talen Horton-Tucker even discussed as a positive asset in any of these trades?
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, they have nothing. They really don't. And I mean, I guess the Nets are just posturing. And also, like, the underrated thing is, like, if the Kyrie Lakers thing goes south, isn't LeBron out next year? Like, I guess if the Nets, I imagine the Nets don't want to make Kyrie happy and send him to the Lakers. That being said, if the Lakers are going to give up 2 unprotected ones to get him, like, this team is going to be god-awful soon. They just are. They're going to be miserable because LeBron is going to leave. We had like Genie Bus, like drunk tweeting, subtweeting LeBron. Like, that was wild. I couldn't believe that. Like, I saw that. Like, that relationship's going to end. And like, you think Kyrie's going to hang around when LeBron leaves? Like, no way. Kyrie at this point is like a hired gun. He's only following where the stars are. He's just trying to hitch his wagon to the right guy. So I see, like, again, if the Nets could reroute Westbrook, take those 2 unprotected ones, even take 1 unprotected one, something back, not THT, but like if you want to expand the deal, I just think, the way that they're phrasing this Lakers, like Chris Haynes got
We'll take Joe Harris.
Chris Haynes got so ruined. He goes like this whole article on the Nets and Lakers have spoken or whatever. Like they're debating over like Seth Curry and Joe Harris for the salary matches, and then like he like retweets himself 5 minutes later. It's like the Nets maintain that they are in preliminary discussions. Like nothing has gained traction. Like basically saying like that came from the Lakers.
The Lakers told me this, and I'm saying it to make them happy. And LeBron basically so that he's on my side.
The Lakers have nothing. Also, so apparently Chris Haynes said last night on like his pod or stream or something with, I think it was like Vincent Goodwill, was like, KD's gone dark. He's not answering anyone. Is that only Damian Lillard, or is there someone else that he won't answer?
100% chance that Dame's like, KD won't respond to my text. Or CJ McCollum. It's probably CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. And since he's a Portland guy, he's boys with both of them. And CJ's like, yo, come to the Pelicans. And he's like, I don't want to go to New Orleans. And then he's like, yo, come to the Blazers. He's like, I don't want to go to the Blazers. So it is that. He's gone dark because he doesn't want to talk to guys who he's like casually friends with, probably. And he's like, I actually want to go play with Book in Phoenix. But so I do just want to say, like, the one thing about the Lakers thing, it's laughable that they think they have any leverage in this situation. They have the worst contract in the NBA that no one wants, even if it is expiring. It's a terrible contract, and no one wants to pay Russell Westbrook $40 million or even buy him out to not play next year. So the only way I would ever do that if I'm the Nets, if the problem becomes, doesn't Westbrook make so much more money than Kyrie, even that you have to send back
to throw in something to get him, which is like, that's why it's like, what are we doing here? Like, maybe they can wait out the competition, but like, I truly believe the Nets may say, like, they'll get the Durant package and then they'll just tell Kyrie, like, we're not sending you to LA and taking back, like, we're not giving up more to get rid of you. We don't like you to begin with.
Pick another team.
Just sit out. I truly believe they'll be like, just sit out. We're not going to play you. Like, it's done. I really believe that the Lakers have such little upside. The only leverage I guess they have is that they're the only team interested. But I really think the Nets will just be like, fuck you. Like, we're not doing this. Like, there's
I'm with you. I'm totally with you on that. But I also am like, my thought was maybe I know the Spurs are rebuilding, so like they wouldn't have a ton of interest in like taking on Westbrook's contract without getting something back. But like maybe they could take on Westbrook's contract and maybe Joe Harris and like try to like rehabilitate him and then flip him later and then move out like Doug McDermott or Zach Collins or whoever just to make the money work.
Yeah.
I know the fact they gave Zach Collins so much money is a joke, but like my thought on this is like basically like if the Spurs, because like here's the thing, you want those two unprotected first. Well, why are the Spurs taking
That's why
Russell Westbrook?
This deal is so screwed to begin with. Like
right.
It just again, it's like what I was talking about with who was it? Was it I think Phoenix, the Nets, and Utah? Like two teams need to be paid while one is paying. The Lakers are paying and they're broke anyway. They're literally in so much debt. Yeah, they have nothing.
Unless the Spurs actually like Talen Horton-Tucker, which they shouldn't, because of what we just discussed.
That's why it makes no sense to me that like this Lakers deal, and like I say that and I'll probably go through anyway, but like the logic isn't there. It'd be the Nets again, just trying to wipe their hands clean the situation and move on, which I hate.
The only reason I would consider taking on Russ's contract in this situation, next year's you're probably going to not be as good next year. And I know you would rather die than watch Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons as your backcourt.
Literally a headache.
And it sounds like a nightmare to me. But they're probably not going to be that good next year anyway. Russ is a negative at this point. Like, I don't even think he's like Wizards Russ, where like he can help you win like 35 games or whatever. Yeah. But like, maybe you could come to a buyout agreement, maybe whatever. And like, I'd probably just do it because it's like, well, we could hold out Kyrie and he could walk for nothing because he's fucking Kyrie, because he might be the only player other than Ben Simmons in the NBA that will sit out an entire season just to get what he wants. And at least I could say, like, the Lakers absolutely have to give up those two unprotected firsts in 27 and 29. And I could happily say, you know, they need to make LeBron happy.
Yeah.
At least we got 2 future picks for a team that's probably going to be pretty bad in a few years. And we've wiped our hands clean of the Kyrie situation. And we now at least have more draft picks that, by the way, you don't even have to keep those draft picks. Like, if you want to make your team good and competitive, if someone becomes available, like even like you flip one of those picks or 2 of those picks for Miles Turner or something to make your team good next year.
Those picks are going to be good. I mean, that 27, 29, that's 5 and 7 years from now. LeBron's not, he's what, 36 now? 37?
He's 37. Yeah.
Like, with all due respect, like LeBron's amazing, but like he's not playing on the Lakers nonetheless 5 more years. Like the Lakers would be terrible.
Yeah. So that's kind of the whole conversation. What's your gut feeling before we get out of here?
I think it's done in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And
after Summer League?
What?
After Summer League,
I think there's probably some sort of meeting that some guy will get the scoop on and it will go down. And I definitely don't think they're back next year. Definitely, I don't see any like last dance happening. I think the bridge has been burned. Why? I don't know. If I had to guess, I hope the Mitchell thing goes through. I think that's more possible than it seems like when I say it. I just really hope we don't settle and take some shitty package. That would really hurt. I do think, I guess if I had to put it together, KD's on the Suns and the Nets do end up with Donovan Mitchell in some complicated like 5-team deal. That will be my prediction, I guess. I'll put that one on the board.
All right, cool. So plug whatever you need to plug. I know that you said you wanted to shout out a few things before we get out of here.
Yeah, make sure you're following me, obviously, at Reed Wallach. BetSided, that's where I work. We have a ton of content on our website, www.betsided.com. Our YouTube page, subscribe, Twitter, we're everywhere. We're doing a bunch of stuff. So, and thanks for having me on as always, man.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, dude. Unfortunately, the biggest thing that happened during this podcast was John Conchar going back to the Grizzlies. But I'm sure before this podcast even can be published that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving will be traded. So we at least have that to look forward to.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Thanks, bud. Thanks. Peace.